Welcome to Left Handed Lock Sport. I'm the EJM3, and today for video 21, we're going to take a couple SFIC key blanks and make an operating and a control key. Stick around. Okay, so welcome to the second video of 4 videos in the best SFIC core overview. In this one, we'll be cutting keys for this thing. So if you bought an SFIC core and you don't have either the control or the operating or neither, in this video we will show you how to cut a key so we can get it working. So obviously the first thing you need is the lock itself, and you need a couple key blanks. So take a hard look at the keyway and then match it up to one of the pictures in the Lockpicking 101 thread that I have in the description below. After searching up and down that page, I figured out that this is a J, and I went out and got a couple J blanks. Well, I got more than a couple, and that's in case I screw any one of these up. I'm not waiting for the mailman to arrive a second time. You'll also need some sandpaper, a Sharpie or other way to mark the top of the pen, and you'll see that in the next step. Also a pick or other sort of sharp, pointy tool to mark the top of the key. And we got a couple files. I have a round and a flat, and this stuff over here is what we used in the last video to gut and reassemble the lock. Also, you might want to pick up a digital caliper. They can read to the 1/1000th of an inch. This will come in handy real quick. Not necessary, but you will be thankful if you have one of these just around just in case. So let's get to the process. I forgot to mention that we will be using a drill press vise to hold down this key while we cut the bitting on the top here. So let's get to the first step. You're going to take the sandpaper and just rub it along the top. It doesn't take long to get a nice smooth finish. Coming out of the delivery man's truck, you'll see that there's a lot of inconsistencies along the top, and we're just trying to get rid of that. And then once we have a nice smooth top, then we can go through with a Sharpie and just make the whole thing black so we have a nice contrast. So once you have the key top all blacked out, the next step is to gut your lock. And there are a couple different ways to do this. You can take off the clip and gut it traditionally, but just beware that the pins in this thing are very tiny. They could be as thin as an 1/18,000th of an inch. So there is a different way to do this without any special tools, and we covered that in my first video in this series. So go back and learn how to do that. It involves punching a small metal rod through these holes down here and popping out all the guts through the top. And doing it that way will ensure that all the pins stay exactly where they are now. So let's gut this lock. All right, so we're back. We are all gutted. We have our shell, our control sleeve, our plug, clip, all of the pins, the springs, and the caps all spread out. And I went through the extra step of marking off the dimensions of all of the pins, exactly how they're laid out here. So if anything happens to these pins during this process, then I can reverse engineer where they should have gone. Also, if you remember from the first video, all of these should add up to the same length. And I found 2 discrepancies to this in chamber 5 and 1. 1 was a little bit too long originally, 5 was a little bit too short. So by switching out this pin and this pin, I got them all back to the same length. And just a quick note, if you need to do a similar change, just make sure that the key that originally came with it is not affected by this change. So I checked this key pin that's in chamber 1, just to make sure that this was the only thing that was on the shear line, and it was. So we can see that that's flush. So changing out that pin with another would not make a difference to the only key that I've had already. Right, so the first step in this process, once we get everything gutted, is to put the key in that we blacked off and smoothed out, and make sure that we have our clip on the end of this. Now, the reason why we have the clip on this is because the key has a depth stop mechanism built into it, and it heavily relies on the clip. So right there at the bottom, where it's flat, actually pushes against the bottom of the clip right here. So that forces the key to stop. If we didn't have the clip in here at all, then the key would be pressed a little bit further into the keyway than it should. So it should stop right about here with the tip just barely protruding. But without the clip in there, it can be pushed all the way in. And this is not the depth that we normally see in the key. So with the clip in place, then it will be exactly where we need it to be during operation. So with that said, grab yourself a sewing needle, or if you have it, a pick, and just go through and mark off horizontal lines all along the key. And that will give us where we should be placing our bitting all the way up and down this thing. Alright, so I have my drill press vise all ready to go, and we have the scratches all up and down this key. So we're going to throw this in there and zero bit out this key with a needle file. This is my round needle file. It's nothing special. I got it at the hardware store down the street. And this measures about 3 millimeters or 7/64 in diameter. So really small. And so when we make one cut here, it won't affect the rest of the cuts going down the line. So I'm just going to put it right on the line that we made before. And just put a zero bit just like that. It's really to start the process off, and it doesn't really go down deep at all. You can see it right there. So we're just taking off the top layer of metal there, and I'll do the rest of these and I'll be right back. Alright, so we are on our way. We have all of the 7 zero bitting in there. And now we have to bring out our plug and make sure your clip is still on here. And I like to go from chamber 1 all the way here at the back and work my way towards the face of the key. So what we're going to do is put in the key pin for each one of these chambers and then file down the slot in the key that we just made for each one. So you can see how that is protruding there. So that's exactly how much of the key I need to take off before that is flush. So I am going to start on that. So I'm going to leave the key pin right in there because we're going to be referencing it often. So this first one is a little bit tricky because it's right on the tip of the key. I'm going to just start it off a little bit here. And then there is a second step to starting this cut, which is making sure that it is center in the chamber. Alright, so there we go. Now what I want to do is take that key pin out and just look inside of the chamber to make sure that we are perfectly centered with the cut we're making. And it looks like we are towards the back here. It looks like some of them, especially this first chamber, is a little bit too far forward. So because we only took off a little bit, we haven't committed to anything yet. So this is where we're going to make the adjustments. So this first one still looks good. We can pop our key pin back into it and check out our progress. and we still got a ways to go. So I'm just going to keep on doing this, and I'll come back once it's flush. All right, so we are making progress. There is the cut that we started to make right there. And if we put this into the plug, we can see that the key pin is almost flush. So I'm going to run a test. But before I do this, a little helpful hint. If you press down on that pin and you feel the key pull out slightly as the pin gets deeper, that means the back of this slope that we're creating is too far forward, and you should start filing closer to the head of the key. You don't need to start a new cut, just simply file the back half of this by pushing the file towards the back of the key. So the way I test it is to take off the clip and bring out the control sleeve. And if I can push this into the front of the sleeve, just along the side here, then that means I'm flush. Now, I can do it, but it's giving me a lot of resistance, so I know that I'm close, but I still need to take off probably 1/1000th of an inch. So when I get this close, what I generally do is, I mean, it's mostly feel, but I know that if I press down with moderate force, and you're going to have to figure out what that force is, and just take 2 full passes, I can see a noticeable difference in height, but it doesn't take off too much that we're going to be oversetting or taking off too much. So my pin fell out here. I'm going to throw that back in. And then let's check. Now the clip is off, but because I'm pressing down with this and pushing the key in, it's stopping on that backward slope. So I know we're still good. And I'll check with that sleeve one more time. See if it goes in smoothly. And this is the process. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until you get a nice smooth transition from plug being out of the sleeve to plug being in. And I think we got it. So it's time to move on to the second pin. All right, so I put my clip back on. We have our first key pin in there. I'm going to drop the second key pin in there, and this one is fairly short. So this is a 0-bitted key pin already. So we will have to do nothing with that one. And a little spoiler, 3, 4, and 5 are basically the same. It's just small little cuts. But once we get to 6, we'll have a little bit of cutting to do. So I'm going to just zoom through these first 5 and get to the 6 so I can show you the only other point that I really need to show you for you to get this all through, and that's how to transition from a shallow cut to a deep cut and how I do it. All right, so I've done the first 5, as you can see here, and I'm working on my 6th one, and I just wanted to stop and show you that I'm off-centered on this 6th pin right here. So you can see that thing dropping down further when I pull the key out slightly, and that means that my groove that I'm cutting right here is a little bit too far towards the tip, and it needs to be moved a little bit back towards the head. So what I'm going to do is just throw this into a vise, and I'm going to keep the groove that I started, but I'm going to apply lateral pressure this way. So what that will do is elongate the hole backwards, and it won't make me go that much deeper. It's more of a lateral cut than anything. And then just throw that back in here to see if the back of that is now good. and I can still feel that drop a little bit. So I need to work on it a little bit more. So I just want to show you how to fix and how to check these as you go instead of having a surprise at the end. Alright, so we are nearing the end of the 6th one cut. As you can see, it's protruding a little bit and probably needs about 6 more passes more to get that thing flush. But before we do that, this is what I wanted to bring up, is that now we have a deep groove, and these slopes are a little bit too steep for the pins to ride along as the lock is being, or the key is being inserted and taken out of the lock. So this is where we bring in our flat file, and what I like to do is just make a ramp for the key pin to ride up and down on, both front and back. So the reason why I like to do that now is because I can now recheck to see that I still need to take that much off. As you can see, it dropped down a little bit. So this could have been hanging up on one of those edges, and now it is almost flush. So instead of 6 passes, it might only need 1 or 2 to get down flush. So I've been burned a couple times doing this. So it's always nice to have that ramp built in before you are finished cutting the depth of the hole, because it can become deeper. Okay, so we are all done with our operating key. It looks like our bitting is fairly mundane, but this is only one of many possibilities that will work for an operating key. That's because we have 7 master wafers that are not in this. This is just the key that will work with all of the key pins. So we can get a way more challenging bitting, but the truth of the matter is that this key will work, and we can test that out with putting the whole thing in the control sleeve and giving it a turn. So it will work. We could put the whole lock back together and give it a test, but before we do that, let's make the control key. Alright, moving on to the control key. So this is the major difference. We're putting the pins onto this shear line instead of the plug. So you can see the entire time lapse of this part of the build up here on the top left, and I will give you the time that it takes at the end. It's not a quick process by any means, but it is pretty rewarding at the end. So what do we do? So I have in this first chamber over here the key pin and the wafer. And when I push the key all the way in, that will push both of those up into the chambers. So first we need to align these chambers up and push the key in. A lot of the times you need a little bit of a jiggle, but now that has risen closer to the top. And once we put the control pin in the top here, we can see exactly how far we need to cut down on the key. And it is substantial. And this is pretty standard for what you'll see across the best keys, is that the operating key is hardly bitted at all, where the control key will be monstrously bitted. So the rest of this process is exactly the same, except instead of using the control sleeve to test to be sure that you are on the correct shear line, we'll be using the sleeve of the entire lock and making sure that it still moves around up there. You'll be able to do that for the first 5, and then 6 and 7 will be sticking out a little bit from the key, or the shell. And so these 2 you just need to eyeball, but once you get the first 5 as a reference, 6 and 7 should be quite easy to gauge. So again, everything about this is exactly the same. You're going to be shuffling these pins around a lot in between the chambers, so make sure that you are very diligent about putting these back in your pinning tray exactly the way they came out. And if you're unsure about your capabilities, please measure all of these with a micrometer before you start, because I would hate for you to shuffle up all of your pins and cut a key to a lock that doesn't match your other key. So I hope you like this time lapse up here. It should be just about finishing up, and once I have this control key finished, we'll be back to wrap this video up. Alright, it's just over an hour later, and I was able to get all of that key out of there. This was it took longer than normal, but I took more metal off than I generally do. And the key looks like it's a half a key. So it took just a little bit longer, but now we got both of our keys all set. We got the lock all back together, and now we can give it a whirl. And our operating key works perfectly. And our control key works perfectly. That's great. So we can put that back into this lock and give it an open for the first time with this lock. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please click like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. So when the third video of this series comes out, then you'll be notified. So next time we'll be creating a custom tension wrench, so we can only pick to and only tension to the control shear line, completely ignoring the operating shear line. So until then, peace.